I can't remember if this was GAS 2024, 2025, when I think it's probably Andrew Titley at Seagull's Fault who said, "Oh, you should get Chip to go and do his talk at Virtual Stampex." And then I think I reminded you of that a few weeks ago, and I am delighted that you're here. You told me that you had a very a slightly insane subject, which was collecting. Well, you'll come to it. So as soon as I hear that it's a bit insane, of course I want that on the Virtual Stampex platform.
You actually, I read the intro, and I think I might have said I'm either insane or brilliant. And so, as I read the note about this, said insanely brilliant.
Insanely
So
brilliant.
insanely brilliant. So we'll see if we can live up to that, or whether we're just going to stick with one side or the other. But I'm going to sort of do something of a free form tour of my insanity, and we'll see where it takes us. So, we're talking about the penny, the good old penny black, blue, red. Just some background information, which I'm sure most of you know about. On May 6th, 1840, the penny black and tuppence blue, which in essence are just little stick-on labels, were introduced and became effective to show the prepayment of postage, so that the mailer of an envelope could prepay without having to necessarily go to the post office during opening hours. They could just put a little label on the outside of an envelope or folded letter, drop it in a collection box, or hand it to somebody to take to the post office, and off it would go prepaid. In 1841, they redesigned the penny black and the tuppence blue. Penny black became red, the tuppence blue got a white line on it. And in 15 years, and 13 years, 14 years, whatever it would be, 1854 basically was the end of the imperforate period. They had transitioned to starting to add the little crinkly edges, the holes, the perforations to the sides of the stamps, and it made it an interesting, a good ending period for me. 1956, my parents gave me the initials CG, and 2001-ish, I wandered into this quicksand. So what we're talking about here, on the left, you can see this is actually from the Postal Museum. This is a proof imprimatur sheet of the penny blacks, and it was done from the plate before they put letters in those little white boxes. What they did is put the row in the left-hand box, A through T, and the column in the right-hand box, A through L. And then they printed the stamps and distributed them. And the picture on the right is of one of the imprimatur sheets, or part of it, since most of them had copies of the stamps taken off. Most of them don't have a T row, for example, the bottom row. But you can see that now there are letters, and relevant to me, the third row down and seventh stamp over has C and G in the corner letters. So if your first name begins with letters A through T, and your last name begins with A through L, you can do something like this. So what ends up happening is you go, wow, wouldn't it be cool to have a penny black with my initials on it? And so you get one. And then you go, well, there's also the blue and the red, and the two different blues and the red. So you go and you get one of those too. And then you go, well, I bet there are others. And then you end up with something like this. So that's where we are now. That's part of where we are now. That's only 119 of the pages of whatever I've got, but there's probably another 10 or so that didn't fit in this picture. I ended up putting together an exhibit that I showed of this stuff. And for lack of a better way to do it, I figured I would just sort of take you through my wonderful exhibit. We talk about different things, and if in the chat or the questions I see somebody asking, what about this? What about that? We'll do it. I started accumulating these about 25 years ago. And I'm now at the point where I have an 8-frame exhibit of them. As I said, it kind of started when I said, wouldn't it be cool to do this? And then this became my fun collection, where I could just wander through eBay or wander through auction catalogs or dealer lists. And very quickly, it turns out, look for things that had CG in the corners. And then over the course of 25 years, it's amazing how much trouble you get into. The good news is that if you have 25 years to do it, you get the sort of the same benefit of compounding you get in interest. If you put a little bit away in the beginning and then it just grows over 25 years, it actually doesn't take all that much if you do it over, if you don't try to do it all in 2 years, you got plenty of time to do something like this. You can go. And this is where we ended up. So I'm going to start here. This is actually the earliest recorded use of a position CG stamp. So the penny black was good to be used on May 6th, 1840. And it turns out there's a book called May Dates, which records all of the very early uses of the penny black. And if you start wandering through May Dates, you find that the earliest example of a CG that was actually used was on May 9th. So it was actually the fourth day, or whatever, 8, 6, 7, 8, 9, the fourth day. And this is actually the first recorded CG. It's actually from plate 2. Plates 1 and 2 were the only ones that were available on May 6th. And you start there, and then so you go back, and they didn't know quite what they were doing. So the first time they made the plate, this is a plate 1 stamp, and this is actually used on the 9th day on May 14th. But they didn't harden the plate. So what ended up happening is the plate ended up wearing, and you can sort of see down in the circle here in the ellipse, some white areas developing, because even that soon, printing for 2 weeks, they had managed to wear down the printing plate so that it began to show wear, which is why they had to re-enter those positions and make another version of plate 1, which is sometimes called plate 1B or plate 1 second state. You can see that even that they were trying to figure it out. And 9 days in, you can already see that the plates were beginning to wear. So plate 1, there were a lot of different ways that it was used. Here's a cute one. Somebody wrote plate 1A right on the face. Thank you very much, whoever you were. Would have appreciated if you hadn't done that, but plate 2. Oh yeah, then you start, oh gosh. It reminds me of how insane I was on this. Okay, so plate, when they came out with the penny black, they came out with this Maltese cross cancellation device. And they made a formula for the ink, and they sent out Maltese crosses to cancel the stamps, formulas for the red ink to use. And then they decided that over time they would change the color of the ink from red to black. So of course, when you're insane, you have to get both red and black Maltese crosses for each of the plates, which is interesting because in this case, like the black cross on the first plate, they didn't start using black until the end of the year. So that stamp was like 6 or 8 months old when somebody used it and put it on an envelope. Now, a penny back then was a lot more than a penny today. I mean, think about it. You can each plate had 240 penny stamps, so a pound. Um, you can't buy a candy bar for a pound now, but if you had spent the pound on that one sheet of penny blacks and put it in the drawer, you can buy a lot of candy bars now, and probably a lot of cars to carry them. Yeah, so let's go. So here's the tuppence blue. Um, Plate one was available a couple of days. Again, same basic time frame as the penny black. They had a little more problems with that plate, so there weren't really. So the plate was registered on May 2nd. There's one or two examples known from May 6th. These are a bit later. The inks were, remembering that they basically were mixing inks by candle and lantern light. So they're slightly different shades, slightly different blends. So the one on the bottom one is the steel blue. It has more of a grayish bluish color. The one on the right was just like that penny black that had the black cancellation. This one was held for um, some number of years until they actually got done with the Maltese crosses and were using these numeral crosses. So this is actually a block of the 1840 tuppence blue with an 1843 cancellation on it in blue, which is a pretty cool thing. I love this stamp. The color is just so wonderful. Should make
Yep,
more.
just had a question about the last slide you used. Was that purple ink?
Was who?
There was this there's a question here. Was it purple ink on plate 1A? Maybe the slide before.
Plate 1A, purple ink.
One slide down. One more down. One more down. No, one more down.
Red. It looks. The bottom one is more of a red Maltese cross, if that's what they're referring to. So
Okay.
there's red, brown,
Red,
and black
brown.
across the top, and then a red in the bottom,
Okay.
and a red border around it. The border is me just saying, hey, it's a cool piece. It's a block.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt your
Oh, it's not
insane
great. It's
passion
fine.
for
This is
blues.
what we want to do. I can get really boring if we start to when we get to the red plate. So I really hope you give me good things to talk about. The one on the top right is blue ink, which is actually pretty unusual. Yeah, how as far as your insanity go? Well, there are strips that you say you can have one stamp in the strip have a CG in it. Where are we now? We're plate 3. Plate 4, same kind of thing. Plate 5. Oh, no, okay. I'm not up to plate 5 yet. I'm back to plate 1. Okay, so they did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then remember I talked about plate 1 being worn. So they went and did it again. And then the next one they came out with. This is all done in order by date, not in order by the way the catalog lists them. Because I am insane. And why would I do things the same way that everyone else in the world does? But I just figured let's see how they actually issued the stamps. And after they started printing plate 5 in black, they had fixed plate 1 and made a second version of plate 1. So here is plate 1 in a second state. Now you can actually tell the difference if you compare them by looking at the little rays around the star in the top corners. One of them has what's called the 7 o'clock ray flaw. One of them has the 10 o'clock ray flaw. Plate 1 and plate 2, where the little ray that comes off of that star up in the top right, top left, you can't see it. There's no ray at the 10 or no ray at the 7. But when you start plating them, you'll learn this stuff or you'll know this stuff. But here's like plate one. So they started then fixing it and coming out with a new version. And okay, now maybe it's telling me my battery is fully charged and wouldn't let me get to the spot where I needed to change the zoom. But thank you very much, Mr. Computer. And then likewise, they needed to do more of the blues, so they came out with a second plate of the tuppence blue around July. So May, June, July, about 2 months later. Plate 6, plate 7. This is actually an insurance form. So they had started embracing the penny black and using it for more and more things. Um, Isle of Wight to London. So another thing is you start looking and you can actually match the stamp to the original plate it came from. There are slight variations in the positions of the letters. There's slight variations in the way the printing flaws. This one has something called the O flaw. So the plate 8, 9, 10, if you actually blow it up really big, you can see that down under the O, if I had a sharper picture that I blew up, there's a little white area under the O. That's a little sharper. You can see there's a little white area under here. So plate 8 has that O flaw, plate 9 does too. It helps you to match the stamp to the plate. Plate 9 actually has a little tiny little flaw in the corner that when they were making the plate, the little line around it extended a bit to the right. So you can tell plate 9 of CG by that. There's actually books you can get that will take you through all the different markings and the positions. They were still using things like the penny post, which was the earlier process by which you could send a discounted letter if it stayed within a certain zone. The penny post, tuppence post, and so some of those old penny post receiving houses would still use their old markings just to let you know, let the recipient know that it entered the mail there. So you start seeing things like that. Okay, we're getting towards the end of 1840, and right around the time they started getting up to around plate 10, they decided, well, that maybe a black stamp was kind of hard to tell that it had been canceled. So they started deciding to change the color of the penny black. So I am going to actually cheat. So remember I showed you in the earlier slide the picture of the stamp without the corners. They actually made a small plate of 12 without any corner letters because they just used the die because the letters were put in by hand with a piece of it masked off. They started playing around, figuring out what color were they going to change the penny stamps into. And so there was in 1840, while they were doing printing and using the penny black, they came out with what are called the rainbow trials, which are really interesting color trials and cancellation trials and paper trials to see if they could figure out what to do to make it so that it was harder to reuse the stamps and easier to see the cancellations. Whether they should use fugitive inks, whether they should use different kinds of papers, and so on and so on. So what this all led up to is the change in at the end of 1840 to begin to print stamps in red. The penny black became the penny red. And this was a a transition. They figured that they were going to release the penny red in February, uh, but they needed to keep printing black stamps to use until then, and then start printing red stamps so that they would have them available when they switched over in February. Then they ran out of black stamps. So they started printing red stamps, and then they went back to printing black stamps, and then they printed red stamps again. So they started on plate 10 to print it in black. They printed 7,000 sheets. And then they printed 6,000 sheets in red sometime around the end of December. And then they went back because they ran out of blacks. And at the end of January, did another 7,000. They fixed the plate because there were some errors on it, like the O flaw. They fixed that and they printed some blacks to tide them over again. Then they printed the reds again because that's what they were going to use in the future. So you got a fun thing there. And the same thing in essence happened with the famous plate 11. Plate 11, they actually started printing in red. So plate 11 is actually not a plate that was designed for black. It was actually designed for red. And then they ran out of blacks, so they made 700 sheets of blacks, and then they went back to printing reds. So it's actually a red plate that was used to print blacks. Okay. So then on and on and on. Then they started doing the plates 5, plate 9. They used them, they pulled them off the shelf, plate 8, redid them all, fixed plate 1 for a third time and did more printing off of that. Here's a cute one. The plate 1 of the third state was sent stampless from Isle of Man to York, and then was forwarded to London, and they put the stamp on in York, but the letter itself started earlier. They also, just when they changed the red, they changed the blue and added a white line, so it was easier to see the cancellations. And then by then the penny started taking off. So by end of February of 1841, they were printing, thousands and thousands of sheets, plates 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all in 1841, 17, 21, all again in 1841. The demand was such that they were going through, 10, 15 plates per year. And of course, when you become OCD and otherwise bored, you start going, wow, I guess I need each one of those other plates, which means you start looking through and building a set. And then you find that some of them have both the Maltese cross. And in 1843, they started bringing in these numbered cancellations for different things, which I'll get into a bit later. But, on and on and on. And I can really bore you if I took my time going through all these things. But needless to say, you end up with a lot of different plates with a lot of different stamps that look just the same. And anyone who doesn't really know about this stuff is completely convinced that you're out of your mind. And they're right. Okay, here they came out with a plate 4. What else did they do to make things interesting? Oh, then they decided, just because they didn't have anything else to do, they were going to change the punches in the little corner letters. So they made a new set of letters. So starting at plate 132, now we have alphabet 2, where each of the stamps has a different, wrong thing. The letters are a little bit bigger than they used to be. So previously, alphabet 1 had smaller letters. and now they are slightly bigger. So you can go between those.
We just had a comment here, Chip, that says, do you think the team at Perkins Bacon could imagine that someone would study this so carefully and that we'd be talking on Zoom around the
It's
world
it,
about this? That would
it's crazy, but actually, this is just the imperforate stuff. Um, there's also what they did for perforation trials, ink colors before the fire, after the fire, or whatever, or when they moved. Um, what they dipped the stamps in. There's paper colors. There's thicknesses. It's yeah. These were utilitarian items. Um, there were no stamp collectors because there were no stamps. But it's true that within a couple of years, there were stamp collectors. There were people who were accumulating these things. Um, but yeah, no, I think it probably was a 20th century um, type of invention when people started really getting down to the plates. Um, I know that in the US, there people started plating some of the early US stamps too, and that was really um, into the 20th century instead of the 19th
Yep.
century. Yeah, so let's see, where are we? We're plate 155. We're getting to some fun stuff. We'll be done with this in a minute. Um, there's the only hole in my collection right now of the plates, 176. By then, most of the stamps were issued with perforations around them. So it was really just a few sheets that were probably 2,500. And by then, they were at 176 plates out there, billions of stamps. So no one has yet, in my records, identified a plate 176 imperforate. But I got to tell you, every time I see an 1853, 1854 cover with an imperforate CG, I have to check to see whether it's that one, but I haven't found one yet.
You said that's
I
the
do,
only gap.
huh?
That's the only gap
It's
in this
there.
in this one.
Drives you crazy. Um, yeah. And so then, as you talked about, we think Perkin Bacon. Well, there was one particular period of time when there's like Lake Red, which will get this group of collectors nuts when you tell them that you have a Lake Red, because no one knows what Lake Red is. Um, no two people can look at two stamps and say which one is Lake Red. It is just a color that even the expert committees seem to have differences about what their reference copies are. Um, yeah, and again, as you start doing this, here's the warm plates, as I started talking about earlier. The warm plates, you can begin to see down on the bottom how, especially right in this under the portrait, how they wore and left the white stuff, white areas. Yeah, so printing colors, ivory heads are kind of interesting because of the way they dip the ink in this prussiate of potash. Um, when they actually wet it and put the ink on it, it caused on the back sort of the ink to migrate and stay away from the head and leaves this white profile on the back around the blue of the potash. Lavender tinted paper. I mean, you've got to be crazy to think that anyone at the time really cared about this. The watermarks. The paper was watermarked when it was made, and if it was put into the press one way, it got the watermark the crown facing up. A few of the sheets got turned around. They got put in sort of backwards, so the little watermark on the back is upside down. Um, here's the first trial separations. So remember, we talked about they needed to figure out a way to easily separate these stamps because remember, they first came out without any perforations, so there was no easy way to pull them apart. Um, but some of the postmasters figured out that if they cut the paper like 95% of the way through, it would end up being like a comb, just held up at the very top. And they could have a whole strip of 12 and then just pull off the stamps as they needed them. But if they needed more than one, and they would pull off the strip of four, would still have the cuts that went most of the way through. So this is a strip of four of the penny blacks and two strips of three of the penny reds. And you can see how they're cut almost all the way through. Um, you have to collect these on paper. And fortunately, somebody left them on paper for the last 150 years. But this was the first pre-perforation separation way that they could make it so that it would be easy to pull them apart. Okay, let's talk about some more fun stuff. We're going to be done with this in about 5 minutes, or 10 minutes or whatever. But we'll move on. So Maltese crosses. They came out with a Maltese cross to cancel the stamp. Most of them were issued by London. A few of them were made locally. They're called distinctive Maltese crosses. You can see if you just look at the bottom, underneath the pictures here, they do look a little bit different. The one in the middle has these double lines. The one on the right at the bottom and at the right has this little fishtail in the inner thing. Dublin is squarer. Norwich is kind of chunky. You can see that there are differences. And so, of course, you need to have all the different Maltese crosses. Leeds had one which has these big loops in it. The other one was just a common cross, same kind. Doncaster, one with a dot in the middle. Perth, Montrose. It's really helpful when you see these. Oh God, I can't believe I did this one too. London put numbers in the Maltese crosses and had a set of 12 Maltese crosses with numbers in them. So, of course, you need to have the set of 12 Maltese crosses on the penny reds and possibly on the penny blue, tuppence blues. So we have 1 through 12 on the reds. That's 1 to 4. Here's 5 to 8. And don't have 5 and 6 on blue. And here is 9 and to 12 on the reds and the blues, and a wonderful pair of blocks of 12 and 15, which actually has a CG in it right over here in the right side of the second row. But they all have the number 12 in the Maltese cross. I'm not quite as obsessive about missing on the 11 as I am on the plate 176, because my insanity only goes so far. But you do have them also on cover. Plate 12 in red and blue on cover. Different colors of the Maltese cross, a blue-green one, blue ones. Truro did a wonderful blue, nice bold blue. This is a purple brown from a place that I won't even try to pronounce. Scottish. Some towns decided they didn't want to print the Maltese cross, so they just canceled it with their date stamp, which was against the rules, actually. The one on the top right, they used a pen because they decided that was the way to do it. The penny postmarks on the stamp are unusual. So here's some of them. This one too, I'm still not sure about the purpose of it. it actually has an expert certificate, but it's always struck me as being very weird, but it's here. Um, has this big two and the Maltese cross. So remember the Maltese cross, they used it till about 1843. Um, and then, of course, they put it in the drawer, and periodically they would pull it out of the drawer. The top one was used on a plate 64 stamp, which was registered and started printing in 1845. So it became a late use of the Maltese cross. The one on the bottom middle here is plate 91, so that's 1849. Plate 92, 1849. And then this one, South Shields in 1852. Handsworth, Birmingham. I'm an American. I don't know where Handsworth is. Um, so there's a chat put up there. Handsworth, Birmingham? Question mark. I don't know. Um, somebody on the thing can answer it. We'll find out. South Shields was actually a replacement. They pulled it out of the drawer because they needed a cancellation device. They used it for a few days, and then they put it back in the drawer. But it's 1852. There's places where you could actually find both of them in use at the same time. So outside of Edinburgh, in Roslin, when they stopped using the Maltese cross, they handed them out to the local post offices for them to use when they got the 131 numeral cancellation. So if a letter came into one of those branches, they would cancel it, send it to the main post office, who would then cancel it again with the star 131, and then send it on its way. So for a little time, you can get that. I'm not gonna bore you, but they started making these numbers. London district offices, 1 to 76, 1 to 49 were basically local. So a local office would have one of the first 49 numbers and would only use it if a letter was not leaving the local area. So it was like a local, so the 28 and the 40, those were on envelopes that were being mailed locally. There was no reason to send it to the central office for routing to another one. But there's like, God, all these numbers. The London inland numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and up and up. And then each of the towns in England and Wales got the oval. So there's a whole selection of England and Wales with the ovals, 306 to 635. Okay. And on Irish, have the diamond. Each one of these is a different number. Scotland is the rectangle. Those numeral cancellations on stamps that were done. Other varieties, actually, after those numerals, you'd get like the things, the barred numerals. The bottom one, the 0 star 0, was a cancellation device used in Crimea during the war. The one on the right at the bottom is actually a French pin roller, which is the French foreign mail cancellation. So probably somebody from Great Britain was traveling in France and said, "Oh, I'll bring my stamps with me so I can mail a letter back." And they put it on the envelope. Probably wasn't accepted for anything, but the French canceled it with the foreign mail cancel. There might have also been a French stamp on that. They may have used the French stamp to pay the local postage and thought that they could use the the British stamp to pay the postage once it got across the channel. We don't know. The problem is we don't know. So we've got that, and let's see where's going to take us. Cancellation in blue. Black was the supposed the right answer, but they did blue. Sometimes they did blue and black. So Maidstone used blue and black. 493 you can find in both. Here's a cute one, mostly because of the internal sheet, which is a wonderful lead smelting letter sheet, letterhead, with a unicorn and a lion. Sure, why not? Unicorns are very hard to find these days. I think they're extinct. But they seem to be a lot of unicorns back then. Blue, green, brown. In theory, you were supposed to put one on each stamp. If you didn't, you were against regulations. So these are slips of 3 with 2 on them. So basically, by now, you should have forgotten the fact that every single item you've seen has had a CG letter in the corner, knowing that that is 1 out of the 240 on any given sheet. But the idea was actually, once it got past the insanity stage to the maybe I'm not quite as insane as I thought, it became a regular exhibit, and you do forget that the person who did it basically is obsessive compulsive and crazy to think that they could build an exhibit like this only using stamps out of CG. But we're going to put that aside and keep going. They made mistakes. They issued the wrong numbers. Blackburn, they gave the number 98 hand stamp, even though Blackburn was assigned 86. So if you look at the snowman of the 8, the little nut hole, the head is on the bottom, and the belly is on the top. It's smaller on the bottom. So they actually flipped it over to use the 98 as an 86. They couldn't necessarily spell, because Bridgewater is not spelled with an E. But, they didn't necessarily know that when they made the hand stamp. What else did they? When they had a problem with the cancellation device, they would send out this generic, they called them skeleton postmarks. I'm boring, Suzanne.
Sorry, I haven't slept for 2 days. You're not boring me. I find this amazing. I love it.
Duplex cancellations. So there's actually a story, the Madeline Smith story, where basically they was a murder trial, and they couldn't pin the murder on the person they thought they could, because the postmarks were not clear, because the date stamps were used to stamp the envelope. So then they came up with this notion of a duplex cancellation, so that you could stamp the envelope and cancel the stamp and still read the cancellation, but not need to use 2 different devices. So you have spoons and you have shoes and you have all other kinds of household goods that were used in terms of shapes. But this is the Birmingham spoon cancellation. And there's a London chief office duplex, so that in theory, the number would be on the stamp and then the date would be on the cover so you could read it. Okay, so we're done with cancellations. Let's just talk about how people use this stuff. Here's a couple of just fun little envelopes. They were often called ladies' envelopes. They were small. They would have a little calling card. They were embossed or had these lovely little scenes on them. There were things called mourning envelopes. If there were black border, you were in mourning for some period of time. You could get an envelope with black borders around them. If you had some cause that you were for, they made propaganda envelopes. This one was for cheap postage, uh, ocean penny postage. Again, you could these are by James Valentine of Dundee. Um, wonderful if you get a chance to see some of the Valentine propaganda envelopes. Not Valentine as the day, Valentine as the printer. But there are temperance, there's peace, there's cheap postage, there's just wonderful examples. Each of these is basically a single or a double rate. Um, but then you end up with some larger rates. This is a quadruple rate at the top right. The black, I can actually show you. Here's a block of 12 you can use to pay a 6-cent rate, 6-ounce rate. A mix of blues and reds, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So that's 7 ounces, probably legal document.
Where's the CG
Uh,
though?
oh, it's right in the middle.
Oh, there we are. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so there's a little gray arrow. Will point you to where the
Oh,
CG is.
clever.
So,
I'm giving you a 5-minute warning, Chip. Sorry.
okay.
No, five
Okay, we're
minutes.
going to just jump ahead. Registered. Um, this was in a parliamentary notice uh, where you're basically the government's telling you that they're going to take your land or build a bridge or whatever, and you only have so much time to talk about it. Voter objections. I mean, there's just all kinds of fun things you can collect in these. Forwarded. I call this one In Search of Mr. Dyson because it was addressed to a Mr. Dyson, Esquire. And by the time he finally did or didn't get it, it had been through basically a wandering around a number of different locations trying to find him. They had hand stamps for too late if it hit the mail after 6 o'clock at night. They would hit the mail saying, nope, we can't get it out today. That's why it's a day late to get to you. And so Scarborough and Edinburgh had those. Um, you know, Glasgow used the little L. There's a GPO, too late GPO general post office. More to pay if you underpaid. This is basically postage due. And then we're just going to go. I'm going to end with a couple of cute ones that are after or things that came in from or went internationally. So this was carried by privately to the UK, and then the stamps were put on, sent to the Shetland Islands. This one was to the United States. It was 1 shilling to send a letter to the US. Sometimes they didn't know quite where to send it. It was sent to Arena, the Arena post office in North America. Couldn't find it, so it was sent back to England without a reason for delivery. Forwarded to France. My favorite cover of all time, to Finland. And there's the routing of it based on the marks on the back. It went via Rotterdam, Berlin, and a number of places to Finland in 1853.
Between the 29th of April and the 3rd of May. 4 days.
Um, well, it was no, it couldn't have been 4 days. 29th. Yeah, well, actually, well, it was. It basically, they kept moving it right along.
Yeah, let's keep moving it. Yeah, it's amazing.
April 30th, it got to London on April 30th. Thames Packet got to Rotterdam May 1st, on the boat. Minden May 2nd, Berlin Danzig May 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Yeah. Amazing. Can't do it today. Switzerland, Egypt. I'm running out of pages. Don't worry, Suzanne, I'm running out of pages. £1.08 rate via Marseille. There was a different rate via Marseille versus Southampton, because it was quicker by a day or something if it went to Croverland. This is a newspaper, the Shipping News, that was sent to Constantinople, and they put a tuppence stamp on it to send it, this newspaper, of the Shipping News, Shipping and Mercantile Gazette, with the newspaper tax stamp, but they put a tuppence blue on it, and the tuppence blue they happened to use on this newspaper they sent to Constantinople, which 150 years later ended up in my box in the corner, has a CG. I'll just end up a couple of late Belgium. I'm just gonna end up with these. These were CGs that were not issued. The top one was a trial of the Dickinson silk threads. The stamp on the left is the only one in the collection which I bought specifically that doesn't have a CG. It has a CF, but I had the CG and I found out that they actually rejoined it as a pair. So I went and bought a CF. The specimen from plate 90, Neil's steam press trial, South Kensington exhibition. So these are all stamps that never actually made it out as stamps, but they are imperforate stamps with CGs. So on that note, you've seen my obsession. Hopefully you are amused by it. I certainly have stayed amused for 25 years putting it together. Of where you can find it, victoria.cgpostal.com. It's all up online there. Have a good time with it.
Thanks so much, Chip. We've just got one comment, which is amazing and great that, like you say, you just have to start something. You never know where you're going to end up in 25 years' time or whatever. You just start putting it away.
Just slow and steady. It was, after a while you get to the point where you can't find something because you've got everything. So you go on to another collection. This was the other collection. Now I've gotten this one to the point where I can't find anything and I need to go on to another collection. I just don't know if I still have 25 years left in me to do it again, but I'll find the next one.
Yeah. And the other question is, do you know of anyone else that's trying to do this with their own initials?
Oh yeah, there are a fair number of them.
Okay.
But most people are smart enough to stop at one from each of the black plates and one from each of the 4 blue plates. That's really all or whatever, but you only need one.
No, you don't. We're going to be insane about it, brilliant about it. Thank you so much, Chip. It's been such a pleasure. You're insanely brilliant. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
We hope to see you at our next Stampex show, at Virtual Stampex or in person in London.